Welcome to Craft School. We're going to make the second version of my paper peony that I created from this frosted paper. Now we have another version that you can look for. There's a link for it below and it's a much larger one. But the thing about this peony is I'm doing it with a series of flowers that I'll show you how to make each one, and then we'll have a full video on how to take all these flowers and leaves and make them into a bouquet. You can use this bouquet for your wedding, or you can make a gorgeous centerpiece for your Thanksgiving table. And of course, you can also use the peony by itself. So let's get started. For materials, you'll need the printable pattern, or if you're using your cutting machine, we have SVG cut files. For paper, I'm using this frosted text weight paper, and I have violet, punch, true gold, and botanic green. I have an 18 gauge and a 24 gauge wire. They're both paper covered. If you only have metal wire, that's okay too. I have a green floral tape, and for tools, a low temperature hot glue gun, wire cutters with a needle nose plier combo, and scissors. So I've cut all of my pieces on my cutting machine, and I have all of my flowers pre-made except for one, and this is the one I'll demo with. So one of the things you might notice is that I took both of my two purple colors and I'm mixing them in each flower. So I have 5 flowers total. I'll cut 3 out of the one color and 2 out of another, and then just rotate in the colors so that they kind of go back and forth from the violet to the punch. And that gives a little bit extra color. You can see in the flower here how it just gives it that depth that you might want when you are making something and wanting it to look a little bit more realistic. Of course, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. I just think it's a really great alternative. So once you've cut out all your pieces, we're gonna start with the center, and this is the gold. I'm just going to take the edge of my scissors, like I do often, and just give it a little bit of a curl. And I'm not doing a whole lot. You can see here how it just has a bit of a bend. And you'll want to do this gently because these are delicate and you can easily tear them off. And if you tear them off, don't worry about it. You can still, use everything else you have. I think the torn part would be hidden. But we're going to try and preserve every single little piece. Okay, so that is ready. I'll use my needle nose pliers. Now for the flower, I'm going to use the 18 gauge wire because I want my stem to be reasonably heavy. It will hold the flower head up. Take that and probably about a 1/4 inch on the end. I'll bend that around to create a loop. You can see it here. I'm going to trade hands. All right, so put a little bit of glue on the end and place that loop right into the glue, and then I'm going to start rolling. Add some more. You can start to work quickly as you get a little practice, and maybe even do it with one glue strand. But I don't like things to dry out too quickly and it gets bumpy, so I'll just do it pieces at a time. Now that I have that done, I'll sort of flatten it on the bottom here and then let that cool. And then we'll start curling all of our petals. So we have the smaller circle of 6 and then a larger circle of 6, and then we have these 2-petal bow ties. So you kind of want to keep them in a pile of each size so it's easier to work with. And one of the tricks, when I'm cutting these, is that it does get really thin and delicate towards the center. So I'm going to grab onto it right at the base so that I don't have any opportunity to tear the petal off. But if you do happen to tear a petal off, I would say just glue it right back on. It won't show. It's just nice to have them together. Okay, so I've curled it all once towards the inside. Now, here's my second curl for each petal. I'm going to go sideways, and this will start to give it a nice cup shape. And then I'll turn it the other way and then get the other side. And the key to this is you want as much variety as possible. You want each petal to look a little bit different. That looks really good there. So I'll go ahead and do all of my petals like that. Another way that I like to curl petals is to roll them around, you know, either a stick of hot glue or a dowel, and that also gives it some shape. In this case, I prefer using the scissor method because it gives a little bit more variety, and I don't want a really precise curl. I want it to be a bit more, I don't know, unexpected, so I think this works really well for that. And I'm giving them a nice hefty curl. I'm, you know, putting a lot of pressure between my finger, my thumb, and the scissor. But you might want to practice a little bit because it is easy to tear the paper if you're not quite familiar with exactly how much it does curl. So on these large petals, there's a lot more surface. And you might even have to give it 2 or 3 curls to get that first big bend, and then maybe a couple this direction and a couple of this direction. And the idea is just to give it as much curve as possible so it doesn't look like a flat piece of paper. Okay, all of our petals are curled. Now I'm going to turn them over. I put them in stacks upside down, that way I can turn them over, and this piece that I want to go on first will be right on top. Now if you use the SVG cut files, you'll notice there's a little tiny hole right in the center. If you cut them all by hand, you'll have to punch a little hole so that you can slide that onto your stem. Now here's another trick that I learned. So, you know, you could put glue on your petals and slide it up. That's one way. I find that if I do that, I get glue along my stem. So what I figured out is that if I just turn it over, put glue on the base, and then slide the petal down onto it, I have better luck. Once that's on there, I really like this to curl nice and tight around the center. So you can kind of press that together and let the glue that's sort of coming out from underneath hold that in place. Then just simply slide the next one on. I'll turn that over and again add my glue to the base. You can just kind of twirl it around in your fingers, and then you'll want to make for sure and rotate your petals so that they cross over and you have this really nice rotation. And you'll want them to fall away from each other. You don't want it so tight that it makes a little bunch, but tight enough so that it looks natural. Even though this is the second peony that I've designed out of 3, I think that, you know, as I'm working on this set, I found some ways to improve it for you guys. So if you have an older version of the download or SVG cut file, you might want to download this one. So after I've placed the first 1 or 2 sets of petals, I have a little trick that I like to do. I'll go ahead and slide more than one on at once, maybe even the rest of them. Since I've stacked them in the order that I want them, they rotate back and forth, you know, from the violet to the punch. So it's all ready. Then I'll kind of hold them up here with one hand, and one by one we'll just twist, add the glue, and then slide them down one at a time. If you're making a whole bunch of flowers, this is a good way. I mean, you're going to want to figure out as much efficiency as possible. Every once in a while you might want to turn it over and look at it. And also, again, make sure that you rotate the petals so they fall on top of each other really nicely. The last 3, since there's only 2 petals on each, you'll want to place them to make, I don't know, somewhat of a triangle, I suppose. So I'm not going to do a perfect X. I'll do a sort of a sideways X. And then the final piece, will slide right between, just like that. And then this is how the bloom looks. This is when you get to pull off all of your strings. And now we'll add this last little piece. This is cut out of the green, and it just gives it a nice finish. You know, we're going to be putting all of these flowers into a bouquet, so the backs aren't really going to show, but sometimes it's still nice to have it finished. So I've just made this into a cone. I've glued it together into a cone and slide it down. Now the trick on this one is because the flower is very flat on the back side and this is a cone, it's not going to work if you just put the glue in the center because there's nothing to grab onto. So I'll put the glue right on the edge underneath the spikes. And then slide that into place and somewhat press it down a bit so that the glue grabs on. Now, if you are not using paper covered wire, I would suggest that you go ahead and cover your wire with the floral tape just to give it a nice finish. Since I am using this paper covered wire, I don't really need to. It's in a bouquet, the stems aren't going to show as much, and this looks really finished. And since I didn't get glue all over it, it looks really nice. So this one is ready to go into my bouquet. Now for the leaves. These are somewhat of a seeded eucalyptus leaf. I didn't put in a peony leaf per se with this particular one. We'll have some later. We have some with some other peonies, but I wanted to give a different texture to the bouquet and give something that sort of hangs. So these are very simple to make. It has a score line down the center. If you cut it by hand, no big deal. You just fold it in half and use the edge of my scissors to give it a bit of a shape. If you feel uncomfortable, you know, doing this, you can also run it down the side of your table and use your hand to press it into your table. It's another way to give it a nice wide piece like this some shape. Okay, so I have 2 of these. Now I'm using a lighter wire for this because, you know, I like to, this is a really nice wire with the paper covering, and I like to save the thicker stems for the flowers. So this will work just fine, especially when we tape them together. It's pretty light. I can curve it with my fingers, or you can use your pliers. Again, just to give it a little bit more to hold on to. And, you know, I talk a lot about how when you glue wire to paper, you really need 2 pieces of paper on both sides of the wire, or else it doesn't stick. Now it works better with the paper covered wire. However, in this case, I'll put the glue down the spine of one and then use the other leaf to back it up. And notice how I've placed it so that the fold goes one direction and then the other direction. And I've also kind of offset it a little bit into a V shape. Now since I am going to be, you know, having these hang out of the bouquet, I do want to cover this with paper tape, or with floral tape. So you see how these are kind of nubby. I'll start right up at the top under the base of the leaf and then just tightly wrap this to give a nice coverage. And you don't have to go down too terribly far. I'm going to tape some of these together. In fact, I'll just do that right now. So here you can see I have taped 2 together. You can see how I'm kind of bringing it down the stem to create this cascade. So I'll go ahead and place that. Well, actually, we need a little bit more tape on this one, so let's do that first. The nice thing about this floral tape is you can stop and start anytime. You can add extra if it looks like it needs it. Okay, I just needed a little bit more covered wire. And then I'll place this Now, I am going to have this hanging out of the bouquet, but I want all of this to be one solid stem. So in that case, I'll use the tape to cover the whole stem. I didn't cut enough, no big deal. soon as I get to the end of this one, I'll just grab another piece of tape. For those of you who have not used a lot of this floral tape, you know, the trick to it, you might expect it to be like tape, and it's not. The trick is that it needs to stretch, and the heat of your fingers will help activate the wax so that it sticks to each other. I like to do my taping all at once because my fingers do get a little bit sticky. Okay, that looks like it's long enough. I can clip that. So this is ready to go into our bouquet. I'll have a video on how to make the cosmos and how to make mini mums and prepare all your leaves, and then the final bouquet will be taking all of these, putting them together and making something absolutely stunning. So make sure you watch those too.